there's two versions of The Big Sleep. There was one that was made in 44, 45 that was released and seen mostly by service members overseas near the end of World War II. And it had a lot more exposition. So when Howard Hawks cut the film, he recut it and added additional scenes of Bogart and Bacall. So I believe that is the version that we are going to see today. And apparently it was a lot of fun on the Hawks set because a famed telegram sent by Jack Warner to Howard Hawks said, "I understand you're having fun on the set of The Big Sleep. This must stop." Jack was amazingly consistent. But aside from Bogart, Bacall, and everything, and Raymond Chandler, and Jules Firthman, and everyone, what we're going to talk about this morning, by way of introduction, is my good friend Stephen C. Smith has written a really definitive, not only definitive, but revelatory, essential book, Music by Max Steiner, The Epic Life of Hollywood's Most Influential Composer. And I'm really, really pleased and proud that Stephen is here to join us. Please welcome Stephen C. Smith. To begin with, The Epic Life of Hollywood's Most Influential Composer. What makes you say that Max is Hollywood's most influential composer? Because you've written the definitive biography of Bernard Herrmann, so many great composers. We heard Victor Young's music this morning. Max,
yes.
Why was Max the most influential composer?
Well, Max arrived in Hollywood in the last days of 1929, the year that Hollywood officially switched to making sound films only. And believe it or not, many film producers and studio executives said, we do not want any music under people speaking in dramas. You can have songs in musicals, you can have a main title and an end title, but Max, who was always pushing for music in films, they said, Max, won't people be wondering if they hear people talking and there's music, people will say, where is the music coming from? Now, forget the fact that for 30 years or so, people have been watching silent movies with music. It's like Max came from this incredible family in Vienna, really the Ziegfelds of Europe, the Steiner family. His grandfather was the person who convinced Johann Strauss Jr., the waltz king, to write for the stage, and from that we got all those operettas like Die Fledermaus that still performed constantly. His father, Gabor, opened this Disneyland-style amusement park in Vienna in 1895 called Venice in Vienna, a kind of miniature Venice, complete with canals and gondolas and a Ferris wheel that many people will know from movies later, like The Third Man. That was put up by Max Steiner's
So that
father.
was the Max's father on the Ferris wheel that Joseph Cotton and Wells, you know, and the only thing Switzerland made of any note was the cuckoo clock.
Cuckoo clock.
Yeah.
That's right. So Max came from this family of impresarios, of showmen. He knew Gustav Mahler and Johann Strauss. And then he came to America, became the musical director on Broadway for George Gershwin, for Kern, for Oscar Hammerstein. And then he learned American music and jazz. So knowing all the symphonic music and popular music, he was the right guy to come to Hollywood when suddenly movies needed sound and music. And he couldn't really get any traction on the whole writing underscoring for movies thing until 1932, when this young tyro named David O. Selznick came along and took over R.K.O, which had a new executive in charge about every year at that point. They just couldn't get it together.
The rotisserie of R.K.O.
And David O. Selznick said, Max, you're absolutely right. Music will make movies better. Let's do it. And in 1932, they collaborated on dozens of movies, some of them like The Most Dangerous Game that we still see, and Max finally got to write the kind of John Williams underscoring we think of, where characters have their own themes, where a place might have its own theme. And a year later, he scored King Kong, which, although not the first of that kind of movie, is the one that's best remembered as the earliest.
One thing I wanted to ask you about King Kong, when we look back at King Kong, that score is just so phenomenal. And was that the first through and through score, or did that make his reputation at the time, or is it just us going back and looking at it retrospectively?
It is us going back, because the whole year before, critics were saying, boy, this is incredible. These scores are phenomenal. Although a few people were saying, where's the music coming from? But not many. And King Kong was such a shock of the new that most of the critics, and it was fun going back to the original reviews, they didn't mention the music. They were talking about this incredible ape and this movie that was full of things they'd never seen before. That said, Max's music was key to that film's success because before it was scored, R.K.O. was slipping into bankruptcy. They actually declared receivership 2 months before King Kong opened. And the people above Selznick said, Steiner, don't write any original music for this movie. It's not worth it. We saw the stop motion animation. It looks silly. This is going to be a massive, massive flop because the studio had poured a fortune into King Kong. David O. Selznick was siphoning money off of other movies, putting it into Kong to help it get made. Well, the producer, Marion C. Cooper, said, Maxie, don't listen to them. I'll pay for the music. And Max wrote this Jurassic Park epic score for the movie, wrote different themes for the characters, and I've seen the film without score, and I've seen it with the score, and I love King Kong. It's my favorite movie, but it is just as Psycho is different without Bernard Herrmann's music. King Kong isn't King Kong without first the terror and then the pathos that the music gives it.
How did he come from leaving R.K.O. to Warner Brothers? Because he was at Warner Brothers for a long time.
Yes.
I mean, just when I wrote my book on Michael Curtiz, he scored 30 of Curtiz's movies at
Yes.
Warner Brothers. Incredible. How did that transition happen?
Well, it happened because Max quickly did get the reputation after Kong and all those within the industry of being the best, the innovator, the guy who not only saw the future of film music, but was one of the best. So Jack Warner, who did love music and film, was really hungry to get Max on board, and they gave him a ton of money. I mean, Max was making the equivalent of millions after a few years at R.K.O. I mean, at Warner Brothers. He spent even more, unfortunately. There were a lot of alimonies, there was a lot of gambling, and that's in the book too.
I was going to say, Max, you tend to view composers as kind of very serious, buttoned down.
Yeah.
But at Maxie, as he was called, he was not only a liver, but he had a great sense of humor.
He was so funny, and I was so fortunate that a great archivist curator named James Dart not only saved Max's correspondence and gas bills, but he saved his and alimony payments, but he saved all of his scores. And somehow Max, who could write a full hour of music in as little as 2 weeks if he had to, if Jack Warner moved up the release date, somehow Max found time to write in the side of the music paper gossip about the studio, problems in his love life, tons of bad puns, lots of dirty jokes, and they were only to be seen by the other people he was working with, the orchestrators,
Right.
turning his score pages into parts for the musicians, a group of men who were also staying up for about 4 days in a row with no sleep. So that's why Max was writing it this way.
One of the other things that your book really drove home is that everyone used to call Michael Curtiz the workhorse for the amount of films that he made and directing through, and he was, but the composers and Max, they got the movie after everyone was done, and it was like, hurry up, hurry up.
Yes.
I mean, the amount of work that he had to do was superhuman, and particularly when he scored Gone with the Wind.
Yes. Max not only had to write over 3 hours of original music for Gone with the Wind at the end of 1939, he had about 2.5 months to do it in. He had to score 3 other movies at the same time, and he was dealing with a producer who went beyond manic. That was his old friend David O. Selznick, who by now was addicted to a lot of speed drugs and was extremely erratic, and Selznick changed his mind, it's fair to say, daily about this movie. And so Max would score a whole sequence, and David would say, now I want it to be with spirituals, or I want this tune, or I want something else. So Max, it's almost like Groundhog Day. He had to score this 3-hour movie in 2.5 months about 3 times. And they barely finished, and they got it done on the day. Basically, the prints had to be shipped to Atlanta for that big premiere we may have all seen.
Yeah, Selznick became a piece of work. I remember
Yeah.
some story, I don't know whether this was Max or Gone with the Wind, it's a love story, and he gets the composer and he says, it doesn't sound like they're stooping.
Oh, you have to do on the side.
I need some stooping music.
Yes. That was to Mr. Tiamka.
No, that was
the
the
son.
Tiamka, yeah. I need some stooping music. That's great. Great, David. A little bit about Casablanca, where the history indicates
Yes.
he was not happy about that score. Tell us why.
Well, it's interesting. Max loved Casablanca, and he had just scored Now Voyager for Betty Davis, who was a friend and who loved his music no matter what you may have heard.
He won the Oscar for Now
Yeah,
Voyager.
won the Oscar, his second for Now Voyager. And he wrote this gorgeous love theme that became a fairly popular hit at a time when you couldn't even make records because musicians were on strike. Well, days after finishing Now Voyager, he sees Casablanca. And as many film composers do and filmmakers, he fell in love with his leading lady on screen. Just looking at the movie, Ingrid Bergman was just so incredible. And his wife, Max's wife, had left him, and they were separated, and he longed for her. So I think he related very strongly to Rick Blaine, all of which is to say, he really wanted to write a big original love theme for Casablanca. And the brilliant producer of that film, Hal Wallace, said, Max, not this time. You have to use this song as time goes by. A song that was not really known in 1942 when the film was being scored. It was written for a flop Broadway show in the early 30s.
Rudy Valley.
Rudy Valley did one recording of it, and the reason it was in Casablanca is because As Time Goes By is in the unproduced play that Casablanca is based on. The co-author of the play loved that song. And Max said, for one thing, he wanted to write an original theme, and then he said, love themes don't go ta-ta, ta-ta, ta-ta. And I won't do it. And Wallace and he had a rare argument and disagreement, and Max usually would incorporate other themes.
Right.
It wasn't that he had a problem with that. He was just so wanting to write an original one. So he told his wife, who was now on the other coast, away from me, he said, they've given me this lousy song I have to use. And then Max was encouraged by his orchestrator, Hugo Friedhofer, to think of it as a waltz, da, 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 more romantically. And by the time Max was done, as I say in the book, you would not only think that he loved the song As Time Goes By, you would think that he wrote it. I mean, you cannot write more beautiful variations on As Time Goes By than the one you hear in the Farewell in France and in the airport scene.
Right.
And as a sign of Max's great sense of humor, when he finished the score, and he's writing a note to his orchestrator, Hugo Friedhofer, he writes, Dear Hugo, I'm very pleased with you. Thank you so much. Yours, Herman Hupfeld, the writer of As Time Goes By. So...
Now, is there anything specific, his score for The Big Sleep, the montage of Bogart and Bacall, 2 cigarettes burning in an ashtray?
Yeah.
Anything specific about this score that we're going to see with this movie?
Very much so. I just wanted to say that Howard Hawks chose Max personally to score this film. It just wasn't an automatic assignment, because for those of us who've seen this movie, we know it's a detective movie that is almost a romantic screwball comedy at times. And you may prefer the music of Bernard Herrmann, you may prefer the music of Dmitri Tiomkin, but no one was as versatile as Max Steiner. He could do dramas, he can do White Heat and Angels with Dirty Faces, he can do romance in Casablanca, and he can do humor. He's one of the few composers who can actually be funny without being kind of jabby, go in the ribs with the music funny. And Hawks knew that Steiner would bring out the romance of Bogart and Bacall. And so that's why he was chosen. And I would just say, there's a typically big theme for the main title, because The Big Sleep, although it's never said in the film, refers to the big sleep we all take at the end of our lives.
The dirt nap.
Yes, the dirt nap. So that's what Max's main title is. Incidentally, he wrote the Warner Brothers fan for everybody here too. That was his creation years earlier. But then if you listen, Bogart and Bacall get this great long romantic love theme that you hear once their relationship starts to take off. But there's a scene in a bookstore with another woman I won't say much about, but listen, and you'll hear this very romantic kind of waltz play after when we get to dissolve and Bogart's leaving the bookstore. And I say that Max being Viennese, a waltz always tells you that it's something that's happened romantic, and it was real while it lasted. So there's many great melodies, a playful little tune for Bogart's Philip Marlowe, because Marlowe he saw as an outsider, so Max gives him this almost kind of comic trickster theme you'll hear in the first scene. So if you've seen this movie 5 times and don't need to try to figure out who killed who, listen and see if you can pick out some of the themes. We'll even get a little clue when we meet Carmen Sternwood in the first scene with her music.
Well, that is a great level of granular detail.
Maybe more than you want.
No, this is reminiscent of Norman Lloyd when I sat up here and asked him, Norman, how did you do the thing off the Statue of Liberty? And then it's like 20 minutes later and the manager's going, oh. But it was fascinating, just as you're fascinating. This is the book, ladies and gentlemen. Tomorrow at 11:30, Stephen will be signing this, and Eddie Muller will be signing his new Dark City, and I will be signing my reconstituted Michael Curtiz. And seriously, this is a great work. It is really a great work, and Steve is a great author and a great friend. And thank you for coming, and thank you for listening. Let's watch the.
Thank you.